Hi guys, it's Luton here, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit around the single player, what I think about it, but also I want to try and explain some of my thought processes. I want to try and explain about why I feel it's important to look at this when you start to think about things within multiplayer, and I also want to try and answer some of the questions people have posted to me, some of the criticism as well that people have posted in the last few days. Now, I know that my awesome subscribers will always say to me, Luton, you don't need to justify yourself, and it's like, okay, I don't, I know that, I'm perfectly comfortable with my own opinion. If people disagree with my opinions, they can suck it up, seriously. But the thing is, I find it kind of funny that when you give something a positive review, or if you enjoy something, in the same way that recently I played Army of Two, and I was, when I played the demo, you guys remember, I posted a video, I was really sarcastic, I really mocked it, I was like, this game is so stupid, and then when I actually went down to the studio at EA, and I got to actually play the game solidly for ages, for, I don't know, whatever it was, we were down there for 5-6 hours, I came away and was like, hey, I actually really enjoy this game, just because I spent a lot more time with it, and I got to see a little bit more of the game, so, your opinion can change about these things, and I guess actually that experience that I had then sort of made me think a little bit more about some of the things that I say sometimes, and it is funny as well that people are always like, oh, Luton, you're just promoting the game or whatever, and it's like, yeah, I'm actually probably one of the most harshly critical people. If people actually knew me as a person rather than just like from little snippets of things I post on YouTube, they would know that I pick things to pieces. I really will. I mean, the only reason I don't do that on YouTube videos is because I just don't think it's particularly enjoyable. I know that it's because it's just you just come across as whining and like, I don't even enjoy it. I often don't even like that aspect in myself, sometimes I'm like, oh man, why am I so miserable about everything, and it kind of gets to you, so sometimes I try to be positive and I try to think, hey, actually, it's not all bad, there's a lot of good here, and you have to try and sort of take it on board, because the thing is it's very, very easy to be negative. That's why you often see so much negativity on YouTube, because it's literally the easiest thing that you can do. It's so, people on YouTube generally when they comment about things it's so simple to make a negative comment. It's the easiest thing. It's why when you watch a lot of Let's Play videos, one of the very generic styles of people doing Let's Play videos is to kind of mock everything in the game. You'll see it and they're like, oh, look at this character, he's so stupid. Oh, why are we here? Oh, why are we getting on this train? Why are we eating a bar of bananas? I don't know. People mock things because it's simple, it's easy. You just look at what's in front of you and go, haha, that's really stupid. And in a similar way, people do that with comments. They look at what people have said and then they mock it. And it's probably another reason why when people come to sort of things like a single player title like this, or, the kind of stuff that we've seen with Battlefield 4, it's why a lot of the stuff that comes out straight away is a lot of negativity. Also, I think people enjoy it. People like to sort of break things down and blah, blah, blah. And it takes a little bit more thought, a little bit more effort to actually sort of think, analyze and break stuff down and kind of take the important parts out of it and really understand what's going on there. Now, for me, the Battlefield 3 single player, it didn't like blow me away or anything. I didn't sort of, when I played it, I never thought like, oh my god, this is like the best thing I've ever played and I must play it through again immediately. No, I didn't think that. But I didn't think it sucked. Like, I never sort of, I completed it, I mean, that says as much as anything else. I completed the Battlefield 3 single player, which I know loads of other people didn't. I know Level Cap didn't. I know quite a lot of other sort of, big players didn't, because they're more interested in the kind of multiplayer aspect. But I'm not. A lot of, Matt Musketeer, he made a great video, and now that I can remember that he was the one who made the video, and I mentioned this the other day, he made a great video talking about, are you a Battlefielder or are you a gamer? Because he was like saying that a lot of people will literally stick to maybe one title. Call of Duty, the same. There's a lot of Call of Duty players, and they play that game solidly, same as probably other things like, for example, Halo or whatever. Different people play different games, and some people make their primary game seriously their primary game. I mean, in the same way that when I played World of Warcraft, I literally used to play that game for like 10, 12, 15 hours a day solid. You might wonder how I did that. Well, you know, that's a different time in my life when I actually had a hell of a lot of free time. I don't have that anymore. So for me, when I get my gameplay, I like to sort of play a lot of different things. I don't really consider myself to be a Battlefield player. I love playing Battlefield and I play it a lot, but I don't consider myself to be like primarily a Battlefield player. So yeah, the multiplayer is a really important aspect for me. Of course it is. I've made tons and tons and tons of videos talking about the multiplayer. I really enjoy doing it, but it's not the be all and end all for me. And, you know, sure, okay, I mean, am I really going to play the single player loads of times when it comes out for Battlefield 4? Probably not. In fact, I probably won't even sit down and do it all in one sitting. I'll probably play a little bit of it, then I'll hop onto the multiplayer for a while, get stuck into that, and then I'll probably come back to the single player, finish it over a period of time. But I probably won't sit down and be like super addicted to it and be like, oh my god, I must complete this. It's just like the best thing ever. It's not really what I think. And I think a lot of people have really kind of misconstrued, which I have to say is not uncommon, some of the things that I've sort of been talking about or saying in the game this week. And another thing as well is that some people, this was a great one, some guy posted this evening saying like, oh Luton, you seem like, you know, you seem really starstruck by the event that you went to and blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, I was. Like, you're meeting like the main producers and directors and the people that are DICE, the people that create DICE, the people who've been making the game that I play for like the last whatever years, 5, 6, 10 years or whatever it is. Am I starstruck by that? Yes. But does that mean that I automatically become biased towards things, in my opinion? No, it really doesn't. It's kind of funny that when people sort of say as well that like if I enjoy something a lot, they're like automatically, oh well, you know, if he enjoyed it, he must be biased. That is so stupid. It's just hilarious. It's like, oh, I'm not allowed to like anything anymore. If I like something, I have to, you know, my opinion must have been distorted in some way in order for me to like it. Like I said on my video the other day, it's like, yeah, that says a lot more about me, doesn't it, than the actual opinion. But getting back to the whole kind of single player aspect, and the single player thing is, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's just an on-rails sequence of kind of strung together cut sequences and blah blah blah, and you know, you have very little involvement in the game. Something else someone pointed out in a comment, which I actually thought was a very good point, was they noticed about the sequence coming up in a minute where the helicopter destroys pretty much all of the enemy targets, and you actually don't really take out that many yourself. And his question to me was, what do you think about that? Kind of like, do you think it's a really bad thing that you've had actually very little involvement in order to progress the storyline along? In fact, the idea that perhaps, you know, you as a player right now in this game, Battlefield 4, you're almost kind of taking a bit of a back seat. You're almost kind of window dressing, and these kind of sequences are going on around you. Now, it's a really interesting point to sort of make, because you can look at it two ways, really. You can look at it as a bad thing. You can look at it that in a way that, you know, you have very little involvement in a game that you're supposed to be very heavily playing, you know, and so therefore you could sort of say, well, what's the point of playing if everything around you is just being done for you? If the AI is kind of taking out all the enemy for you, and you have very little involvement in the game, you know, is that really a game that you should be enjoying? And people maybe feel a bit cheated that they've, you know, paid to get a game, and yet, you know, you're almost kind of just watching a story unfold. However, there is another way of looking at it, and I'm not going to tell you which one I'm on, to be honest, because I think it's better if I stay objective in this video and sort of just, you know, discuss around the topic and let you guys comment and see what you think in top. If people are genuinely interested in what I think, I'll maybe look at that in another video. But the other way you can look at it is that instead of, you know, feeling that that's a bad thing, you could look at it as the fact that you're part of a story and involvement, and these kind of events, yes, they are moving on around you, but the very fact that the AI actually is dealing with the enemy, it, to be honest, adds, well, a bit of realism, because it would be ridiculous if you had a helicopter and all these guys around you. If there's a heli with a minigun here, now you see how he takes everybody out there, basically, because you sort of spotted and marked those targets and you called him in to do that. Again, you know, that's, why is that a bad thing? And I think you can look at it both ways there. And the thing is that when you're talking about a single player storyline, you're kind of involved and it's more these kind of things going on. It's another reason why kind of cutscenes and cut sequences aren't necessarily, in my opinion, I don't really see that they're a bad thing. I can understand though that they're kind of frustrating, and sometimes personally I feel like cut sequences can kind of go on a little bit too long. I think it'd be nice if you had more physical involvement, or at least if you were not perhaps sort of taken out of control. Like when you're in a sequence like this where you're kind of in control of your character, I can sometimes find it a bit irritating when you suddenly get taken out into a cut sequence and you have literally no control of your character whatsoever, and you are literally just sitting there watching the screen, watching people talk. That can be a little bit frustrating. Even the ability to kind of look around a little bit. I can think about other single player games which are pure single player games where that will happen, and you literally just have to stand there waiting for people to chat away, and you're kind of like, okay, fine. You have to be in the right mood for it. But something else to kind of come back with in this area is the whole kind of on rails thing, where you literally have very little choice about where you go, and you're kind of just moving through scenery. You're on a set path and you can't really deviate from it. The thing is, it's very difficult to kind of have multiple routes in a kind of storyline like this, because they need to move the story in a certain direction, and it's going to be very difficult unless you go for example, some completely open world environment and an open world game. You're not going to really be able to do that, and even then, it's kind of, those games don't really work in a kind of progressive story. You tend to do individual missions, and those missions themselves have a story. So you shouldn't really think of it as being a bad thing. You basically have kind of two main sort of single player styles, which is the kind of open world questing style and this kind of more linear style. But is that really a bad thing? I don't really think so personally, because at the end of the day, you know what you're getting into. When you pick up a title like this, or like, for example, I don't know, Killzone 3, Call of Duty, any kind of mainline sort of single player first person game, okay, you're going to know that the single player aspect is going to be pretty linear. You're going to go point to point, mission to mission, and you're going to be doing things along the way. It's going to be leading you along a path. There's nothing new about that. It's always been the way. But the thing is, what would be the alternative? A lot of people are very quick to criticize. Again, like I said earlier, it's very, very easy to be negative. It's very, very, very easy to be negative, to the point of being irrelevant, basically. And like I say, what's the alternative really? What would you do whilst keeping it in the realms of reality to make it different? I mean, would you give your character multiple different options? Would you give your character multiple different routes, etc., etc.? Think about the complexity involved in doing that. Think about how much extra time, extra money, extra development team, extra resources would be required to build in all of these extra things. Just think of the kind of logistical parameters as well for creating something like that. It's really, really immense, and it's, to be honest, often a little people's expectations, like I've said multiple times on other videos and things like this, people's expectations can be highly unrealistic compared to what is feasible within the realms of game creation and budgets and blah blah blah. So all of these things people really need to sort of take on board, and that's another reason why, like I've said already, that it's easy to criticize. It's not so easy to actually sit and think, hey, this is the point I've made, but what's the answer? A lot of the time people give sort of comments that don't really have any answer. They're kind of one-off, off-the-cuff statements that don't really have any proper forethought. But anyway, coming back to the on-rails thing, so, there are other games that do it, some more so than others. I remember that Tom Clancy Ghost Recon, I played that game through, and Jesus, it was so on rails. It literally was like your character was strapped to a little sort of metal line, and you were just going along it. But again, at the end of the day, I don't know, you kind of had an experience there. It was okay. I think so long as you go into these things with your eyes open, it's fine. But different people approach things in a different way as well. I've had so many people who watch my Far Cry 3 playthrough, and they have sent me messages or made comments and said, wow, Luton, when you took this base or whatever, you did it in a completely different way to me. You really did approach it in a really different way, and it's given some people a little bit of thought and insight that you can deal with things in certain different ways. Now, the other thing that I would say is that a lot of people have said, it's all very heavily scripted and so on and so on. To me personally, whenever I play a game, I like to be immersed. I like to sort of really lose myself in a game and I take like people always say I'm a very serious person. It's because I am. And so when I play games, when I play single player titles and things like that, I really like to lose myself and take it very, very seriously, even regardless of whether or not it actually has any impact, because it's fantasy, it's escapism. That's what these things are. It's you put yourself into the game because you want to be immersed in the storyline. If not, I don't really understand why you would do it. It's like reading a book or watching a film. You're detaching yourself from reality to be immersed in a world, and that's even more so what happens in a game. It's another reason why I don't like sort of fast playthroughs for LPs, where people are like, okay, we got key switch here and we run over to here and you pick up the box and then you run here and blah blah blah. To me, they may as well not be playing. It seems to have literally no relevance whatsoever to do it in that way. It's more to kind of lose yourself, and this is another thing that people have said to me with my LPs, is they've been like, wow, Luton, you play things like I've not played anything. It kind of gives them a different perspective on. And that's not to say that other people don't do what I do. I'm sure that a lot of people play games like I do. I'm sure a lot of people really like to get lost in the characters in the moment and sort of take things serious. But you see, a lot of games as well, you can play in that way if you want to, that fast action running way. There's a lot of fully FPS games that, people have said, Luton, but, on some maps on Battlefield or whatever, you could literally just run through, you could take out very minimal targets and just run through. But my real response to that is kind of, why would you? Why the hell are you even playing the game if you're going to try and play it like that in the first place? It seems to be no point. To me, single player games are about losing yourself in the story, the characters, and if you don't go into it with that intention, then I really don't kind of get why you would. So perhaps people can tell me why they would play them in a different way. I mean, I know some people might play them for the trophies, some people might play them just to literally see the game. They kind of bought it and they figure, hey, I may as well sort of look at what's here. But for me personally, I just don't get why you would sort of play it through if you were not prepared to kind of invest something of yourself in it. And I do that with any game. So that's really why, from having seen the single player for Battlefield 4, I was like, I could understand and I could imagine how I would play it. I imagined like how I would get involved in it, and that is why I gave it a kind of positive response, because I thought, yeah, this is a game I can see myself really kind of getting through, enjoying. Now, to come on to the next point, which is about why I kind of was translating things and saying, oh, you can take this, you can take this, you can take this. Now, from my interview that will have been posted up by the time I do this, with Carl Magnus, he may have explained a couple of the elements and things that are involved there with the kind of single multiplayer aspect. But the thing is, people need to understand, a lot of people as well have said, well, Battlefield shouldn't even be making a single player because it's been a multiplayer game. It's true, Battlefield was always a multiplayer game, but as Carl M said, DICE are pretty strongly committed to making a single player. So at the end of the day, whether people like it or not, it seems that DICE have decided they want to do it, and people are going to have to just lump it, basically. And he said that a large, he knows that there's a proportion of people, a proportion that obviously matter to DICE, who really want to play the single player, and so for that reason they're going to do it. And as I say, people are going to just have to stick it, because it's there, and clearly it's going to be there to stay. Then the other thing is, people seem to kind of not quite be on board or get the whole thing that by creating a single player, you are in effect kind of creating a world, you're creating a dialogue, and I can imagine very much that would be quite easy to kind of translate into multiplayer. And people may remember that often, you'll find that when you create single player games, some of those single player maps and quests and missions will then translate into multiplayer maps. They'll take elements and adapt them. So it's not as if they have to create a multiplayer from scratch. They will often translate elements from a single player into things. So think about all different maps through Battlefield 3, and there's several that will translate in that way. So that's another element to it. And the other thing is that, as I say, looking at the Battlefield 4 trailer, there's a lot that you can divulge there. Everyone's saying, oh, we want to see multiplayer, Come on, guys, get your feet on the ground. It's just unreal. I mean, Christ, we haven't even had any alpha gameplay yet. We haven't had that, and you want to see multiplayer? Come on, get your head screwed on. It's just not realistic. And so people complaining and whinging and blah blah blah, it's like, what do you expect? What do you expect in March, before it's months and months and months and months and months before we're anywhere near to the game being released, and people want to see multiplayer? Yeah, seriously, get a grip. the thing is as well is, like I say, you can glean a lot of information by looking at the single player. You can look at the dynamics, you can look at the way the weapons have changed up. Okay, I mean the weapon is positioned slightly lower than it was with the other Battlefield 3. So there's lots of little bits and pieces that will translate into multiplayer. You just got to look for them. You just got to read between the lines. And this is what I said about events and reveals like this. It's not about hard information at this stage. It's about reading between the lines, looking at what they've presented to you and understanding how those things will cross over into multiplayer. And as I've said in a couple of other videos, if people can't do that for themselves, it's nobody else's fault to blame. They just need to kind of, sort of try and take these things on board instead of being spoon-fed constantly, which is unfortunately what, seemingly all some people can manage. I mean, there's other things as well, like the whole spotting feature. Now, people have basically said there is no tutorial for multiplayer, and a lot of people have said about Battlefield 3, oh, well, the single player is a tutorial for multiplayer. Well, isn't then it really a great thing that they've added in some things like kind of a little bit more vehicle control, and the fact that they've added in this spotting feature and stuff? All of these things are going to help contribute to us having a better experience overall as players, not just people wanting to do their own thing, but everyone's experience overall. It's going to help benefit teams, it's going to benefit players, and so it should translate very well to everyone overall. There's a lot of other things as well, like for example you can look at all the different animation features. Later on you can see the grass and foliage of plants moving around and how those wind forces with Frostbite 3 are being affected. And again, the smoke, the fire elements, graphics have been adjusted, improved, particles too. So all of this stuff kind of moves towards the game being a more whole package. And as I say, it's all down to people actually sort of reading these things for themselves instead of being spoon-fed information. So I guess the last thing that I want to say really is about kind of what my general overall feeling was, kind of coming away from the event and sort of thinking and breaking things down. And the thing is that I know that along with all the other YouTubers who went to this event in Stockholm and probably also in the US at San Francisco, we all came away, not just me, but we all came away feeling that we had a better understanding. And everybody said this when we were going back to the hotel or when we were flying back. Everyone had kind of discussed, we're obviously talking about the game, talking about the people that we've met, and everybody said that they had a kind of newfound understanding of DICE as developers and people and what they were trying to do with their game. From the discussions, the breakout sessions that we had, and for me personally going down to DICE Studios, talking with these guys. I talked to, as I say, Lars Gustafsson. I talked to a couple of other DICE employees as well. People that are quite awesome in terms of designing different elements. I talked to the main designer of all the weapon systems and so on as well. And these were just kind of casual chats. I was just kind of standing there, we were just like, oh yeah, the game, and do you remember in Bad Company 2, and do you remember in Battlefield Vietnam, and we were just talking about the games. We weren't having kind of serious discussions, and we weren't sort of putting words into mouths or anything like this. It was just good, friendly, fun discussions, and it was a hell of a lot of fun. Really, really enjoyable. I loved the hell out of it. It was just great to meet people and understand them a little bit better. And that was the thing, is that from meeting these guys and from hearing what they had to say about the stuff, and these breakout sessions where you could see the entire design process. And I tell you, some of the other guys that were there with me, the other YouTubers, and they hadn't really necessarily had a lot to say about the title, because maybe some of the guys, as you know, were kind of mainly COD players. But from looking at the kind of, for example, the art direction sessions and even the story sessions where they were explaining about the single player, they came away from that saying, like, wow, I really didn't understand before how much detailed process goes into designing the games like this. And by going through these things, it gave them a better understanding. And that's probably why when you hear videos from someone like me, as opposed to people who have literally only just watched the trailer and they're using that as a way of breaking it down, that's why my opinion is going to be slightly different, because I've had a different experience from those people. I've heard things a little bit differently. I've spoken to people. I've seen the game in a slightly different context. And so that's why my opinion is going to be slightly altered. I mean, yeah, sure, could I be really critical? I could break things down. I could go, oh, if you look at frame 223, you'll notice that blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, who the hell wants to hear that? It's just boring and just tedious, and it just seems really anally retentive to me. I think it'd be much more just general to kind of try and have a positive outlook on things, try not to be constantly downbeat and negative. And let's face it, I'm very good at being downbeat and negative if I want to be. Christ, I could burn the hell out of anything if I really wanted to. But to me, I just don't think that's a really great thing. I don't think it's a good way to be. It's something about myself that I've tried to change, because I can just generally in my life be quite a sort of more negative looking person, because that's kind of just generally how I tend to have a sort of outlook. I can be quite a cynical person at times, and so I tried to kind of glean a slightly better outlook on things recently, and to, you know, with when it comes to gaming, not just Battlefield but other games as well. I've been trying to look sort of more on the positive, and I've tried to understand kind of a little bit more about the hardships that developers have. Because I've spoken before about the frustrations of developers when it comes to things like sort of producing DLCs, and how absolutely frustrating that can be. And again, a lot of people don't really think of it in any perspective. They literally think of it from their own point of view, what they want from a game, and they don't consider anything else whatsoever. For me, I try to look at things as a kind of whole picture, and that's more and more how I try to see things. So guys, I hope this has been a little bit insightful. I hope it's given you a little bit of sort of perspective on where I'm coming from. I hope that when people sort of listen through this video, they'll be fair and try and understand my point of view, try and understand what it is that I'm trying to say to you, where I'm coming from on this. Because as I say, it's not about point scoring, it's not about sort of being right or wrong or on anybody's side. It's just about trying to be objective and to try and understand the processes, because at this stage in the game, when we're so early on, there is no point in being so harshly critical, because it's an unfinished product. It's utterly stupid for people to be going, oh my god, this sucks, or what is this, or there's no suppression, or the sun's too bright, or the guns look weird. It's like, you know, we're so early on in the game, it's totally stupid to be that analytical. Really it is, and it's much more important to kind of look at things within a kind of whole sphere and try and take those things into consideration. But the single player aspect as well, like I say, it's something that I think people really don't consider enough, or they don't consider it in the right way, and for that reason people can be overly negative. And it's true to say as well that when you have an FPS title, I think it'd be fair that the majority of people now are interested in multiplayer. So obviously when a single player aspect comes out, it's going to turn some people off. But like I have already said, there is a lot to be learned from the kind of single player trails, and people just need to engage their mind and think a little bit more, instead of just going, oh my god, it's a single player. Yeah, no, you need to just use your head a little bit. So thanks for watching today, guys. It's been a little bit of an extended video. I will have provided an MP3 link for this as well, because I want people to have the opportunity to listen to these things, these slightly longer discussions where the discussion is the important point and not necessarily the video in the background. I tell you what, I'm getting sick of using this Battlefield 4 trail, so I'm going to be going back to some Battlefield 3 footage soon to talk about things in general. In fact, this may even be the last one that I run it on. I just thought it was a good point of view to kind of run this one through, because we're talking a lot about the single player and a couple of the features in there, so it kind of runs on pretty well. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to everybody's comments on this one. I hope that people can keep their comments constructive so that everyone can actually have an intelligent, good discussion. Try not to make sort of bullet pointed off the hand comments, because those are the kind of ones which are, to be honest, very disposable. People make a comment like that and it just gets forgotten. Much better to make a kind of well thought out comment that people are actually going to get engaged with and actually have some sort of proper dialogue. I hope this has been enjoyable today, guys. I hope people will sort of try and take on board some of the things that I've said, try and understand literally what it is that I'm saying, and as I say, I'll provide a bit of an MP3 download, as this is a slightly longer video. So all that's left for me to say is thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time for a little bit more Battlefield discussion, thoughts and analysis.